10-month-old Finley Bowden only spent 39 days with his parents before he was found unresponsive with more than 130 separate injuries to his body. 38 Days of Hell, the Finley Bowden case, trigger warning. So Finley was born February 15, 2020, to his mother, Shannon Marston, and his father, Stephen Bowden. Now, Shannon and Stephen were in a very tumultuous relationship and were excessive drug users. So they had been investigated by CPS all throughout Shannon's pregnancy with Finley. They weren't passing their drug test throughout her pregnancy, their house was filthy, they had constant reports of domestic violence. So by the time Finley was born, CPS removed him from his parents' care and placed him with his maternal grandparents. Now, within days of him being removed from his parents, they requested custody back. But Finley would remain with his grandparents for the next 9 months. But Shannon and Stephen got a custody hearing on October 1st, 2020. Now, during this court hearing, social workers tell the judge they have some concerns about Finley moving back in with his parents. One social worker even tells the judge, if you place Finley back with his parents, he will suffer physical and emotional harm. And the social worker suggested a 4-month transition period so they could get their act together. They're still fighting a lot and being reported for domestic violence, so they're going to need regular drug testing and parenting classes. You know, we're very concerned about their excessive drug use. They still can't pass a drug test. But this judge is an untrained family court judge who was filling in for another judge that day. He ignores all the social workers' warnings and rules that Finley be placed back with his parents within 8 weeks. And this 8-week plan included unsupervised visits, overnight stays, no court-ordered drug test, no psych evaluation. He ordered no parenting classes, no domestic violence resources, no anger management, nothing. I don't know what that judge was thinking, putting this baby in that situation. November 17th, Finley is sent back home to live with his parents. So on November 17th, 18th, and 19th, social workers were allowed inside the home to visit and everything seemed okay. But for this baby, things were about to take a drastic turn. On November 26th and 27th, social workers cannot get them to answer the phone or open the door. On November 29th, the social worker asked the parents to send in pictures and videos of their home and of Finley to see how things were going. Shannon sent these pictures back to the social worker and everything looked safe and clean. But the social worker didn't know Shannon was sending her old pictures from when Finley first came home. And this is what the house actually looked like now. This is what they were giving Finley. Around November 30th, Shannon takes this picture to prove that Finley is okay, but you can tell she's using. By mid-December, social workers had not seen Finley in weeks, and he was in bad shape. December 23rd, 2 days before Finley was unalive, a social worker comes back to the house, but they refuse to let her in because they claim Finley has COVID. And around the same time, the social worker witnesses Shannon doing a drug deal out in the parking lot in front of their home. That social worker did not alert authorities. December 24th, Finley is last seen being pushed around in a stroller by his father while his parents shop. And this was merely hours before his death. December 25th, 2020, Christmas Day. At 2:20 a.m., Shannon Marston calls 911 and says she found her baby unresponsive and not breathing. The paramedics came pretty quickly, like within minutes. Of course, the house is a filthy mess and there's drugs everywhere. They find Finley is filthy and covered in dirt. Paramedics realize Finley's nose and mouth is covered with bruises, wounds, and sores. Paramedics rush Finley to the hospital where he's later pronounced dead. The doctors are quick to notice all 71 bruises on Finley's body and they question Shannon, but she tells them various lies to hide the abuse. While at the hospital, Stephen was overheard saying he was going to sell Finley's pushchair on eBay that evening. He was also heard asking a relative what they were cooking that day for Christmas dinner. Stephen and Shannon didn't seem like grieving parents at all. They were seen laughing, snickering, even flirting. And they were seen laughing as they called a cab to leave the hospital. Big trigger warning, Finley's autopsy report is very hard to hear. Finley had over 135 separate injuries to his body. This included 57 bone fractures and over 70 bruises. His injuries consisted of a multi-story fall, like someone falling from a building. His ribs, shoulders, arms, legs, pelvis, collarbone, thigh bone, shin bone were all broken. Finley's thigh bone had a spiral break, which was broken in 4 places. His pelvis was broken in 2 places from being kicked and stomped repeatedly. Finley had 2 burns on his left hand. One burn was from a lighter flame, another burn was from a flat, hot surface. Finley's shin bone had been broken by being held upside down by his ankles and twisted, shaken, or dangled. Finley had multiple episodes of blunt force trauma to his head. Both of his arms and legs were severely fractured. Finley's untreated bones caused him to develop severe infections, including sepsis, encarditis, and pneumonia. The inside of Finley's mouth was severely torn in 2 different places, where someone had forced something into his mouth very hard. This injury could be from a bottle, a cup, or certain things that were found in the home that I can't say, and I honestly hope that's not what it is. I don't even want to know what caused that injury. His toxicology report showed there was cannabis in his system that he must have inhaled within 24 hours of his death. Out of everything, he died from pneumonia, sepsis, and endocarditis. The doctors all agreed, had they taken him for medical treatment before that day, he could have been saved. You're probably wondering by now, how didn't the neighbors hear this baby crying from all this abuse and torture? Well, nobody heard him because one parent would hold his mouth and nose shut as the other parent abused him so he couldn't cry out. So they're finally arrested and charged, and I don't know what's wrong with the UK's judicial system, but it shouldn't have taken as long as it did. And of course, they both claimed they were not guilty, they had nothing to do with this, they didn't even know how it happened, that he was sick and he just collapsed. Stephen told the police maybe Finley got all these injuries from where I was rocking him to sleep. Like, bruh, do you really expect us to believe that you caused over 135 separate injuries to this baby by rocking him? Shannon's excuse was she's a victim of domestic violence. Shannon knew the only way she was going to get back out of jail is if she played the victim. So she called a social worker and said, look, Stephen did everything. I was the victim. He beat Finley to death, and there was nothing I could do about it. She thought because they had a history of domestic violence, the courts would feel sympathy for her and they would just let her go. So she puts all the blame on Stephen and doesn't take any accountability. Now, even though she put all the blame on Stephen, secretly, she still loved and wanted to be with him. When they were bailed out, the judge put a no-contact order on both of them. And the first thing she did when she got out of jail was run to Stephen and hook up. And while in jail, she was caught writing him numerous love letters professing her love for him. Up until recently, she was still writing him love letters talking about we're in this together. She is no victim in this. She hurt and neglected that baby just as much as Stephen did. Don't forget, she was the one getting benefits for Finley and using it to buy drugs instead of taking care of him. In a series of events, the pair worked together to keep professionals, doctors, social workers, family and friends away from Finley to protect each other and cover up the serious violence and violent injuries. They canceled multiple doctor's appointments and visits with social workers. So they were both finally sentenced this year. The judge found Stephen guilty and gave him a minimum of 29 years in prison. They found Shannon guilty and gave her a minimum of 27 years in prison. Is this some prison time? Yeah. Is it justice for Finley? No. They're so entitled, they're sitting in jail right now, still demanding sympathy. This isn't fair. I shouldn't have to pull 30 years. They're showing no remorse at all. What happened to him should happen to them. But get this, and I'm not going to call names, one of their parents paid for both of their lawyers. And I mean, this parent spent hundreds of thousands of dollars bailing them out of jail, paying their attorney, all their court fees. I don't know how any loving grandparent could do that for them after what they did to that baby. Let's take a moment to remember Finley. Finley's extended family said, I don't know how anyone could do this to him. He was such a good baby, all smiles, always laughing and giggling. He would cackle so loud when he laughed, it was so cute. He was just an innocent little baby who enjoyed being cuddled and held. He was the most sweetest little boy with the biggest, most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen. One friend said, I'll never understand why the judge ruled in their favor. They couldn't take care of a dog, let alone a baby. And anyone with half a brain or eyeballs could tell. I can't believe social workers seen Shannon out in the yard doing a drug run and they didn't call the police or do anything. Why didn't the social worker call the police department to do a well check on Finley? They should have busted the door down.